Hello, my name's Kevin Partner from makingyourown.candles.co.uk. In this video I'm going to show you how to make container candles. You can either make these candles using the kits that we provide at makingyourown.candles.co.uk or by using your own materials. The particular ones that we're looking at today are ones that you will be making using your own containers. The most important two things about your container candle are the container itself and the wax. Now let's look at the container to begin with. A good container needs to be heat proof. Clearly, it needs to be non-flammable. And in most cases needs to be wider at the top than at the bottom. The shape needs to be like this. This is to prevent the wick flame from burning the edge. Whilst all these are heat proof, if you have a naked flame touching the edge, then that can cause cracking. So cups and mugs, many bowls, those sorts of things are ideal. Glass, I would personally tend to only use glass that has been specifically designed to be heat proof. So as an example of that sort of thing, jam jars, they're developed so that they can be scalded to sterilise them. Jars like that, bottles, any bottle of that sort, again it must have a wide top. So the other component is the wax. Now it's important that you use container wax for making container candles. That might seem like stating the obvious, but most wax that you come across has been used to make pillar candles of one sort or another. In other words, candles that have come out of a mould. Now to make moulded candles, the wax has hardeners added. These hardeners cause it to shrink, which pull the edges away from the mould and allow it to be released. Those hardeners are no use to you in a container candle. You don't want it to pull away from the edges. Indeed, if you've bought some of the container candles you'll find in the local supermarket, the problem with them often is they will shrink away from the edges because the wrong wax, a cheap wax, has been used. So you need to use the right wax. Do not use a pillar blend, use a container wax. Now if you want to recycle, then by all means mix your recycled wax, which should come from a container that you have emptied, or you can try and use a standard pillar blend, but you will get some shrinkage. But always mix it with 50-50 proper container wax. Okay then, so these are the things that you will need in order to make a container candle. Firstly, you'll need wax, as I mentioned. How do you calculate how much wax do you need? Well, it's a pretty simple process. You take your container and you fill it with water up to the level you want the wax to finish at. You tip the water into a measuring jug and note how many millilitres that comes to. So in the case of this particular one, this one is around 175 millilitres. You take 10% off that roughly. That gives you the number of grams of wax to use. So in this case, I'm going to be using just to round up to about 160 grams of wax. So that's pretty simple. You can find more information about how to do that on the Making Your Own Candles blog, which is makingyourown.candlesblog.co.uk. You can also find a link to that on the makingyourown.candles.co.uk website. The second thing you need is some wick. Calculating this is pretty simple. We have a table on the makingyourown.candlesblog.co.uk website. Again, there's a link from makingyourown.candles.co.uk. What you will do is measure the opening at the top in centimetres or millimetres, and depending on the particular wax you're using, we will give you the correct wick to use. You will also need a tab like this. This is used to help anchor the wick at the bottom of the cup. You need some mould sealer or white tack or blue tack. You need some dye. Again, this is easy to calculate. Of course, it depends on the colour depth that you want, but on average, you will want 1 gram of dye for every 100 grams of wax. Now, 1 gram of dye is roughly the size of a 10p piece. So that's one way to calculate it. You'd also need some pliers, some scissors, and a double boiler set. Now, I've got my double boiler set here. This particular one is called a porringer. But basically all it is a larger saucepan with a smaller saucepan inside. You put perhaps about 1/5 full of water, just so that it's enclosing the bottom without there being any great danger of it boiling over. The wax goes into the smaller saucepan, and the reason for that is because wax has quite a low ignition point, and if you were to put it straight into the bottom pan, there is a possibility, particularly if you're using gas, that it could ignite. So better safe than sorry. It needs to be warmed up nice and gently. Okay, so let's get going. Our double boiler's ready. I've weighed the wax. So the first step is to put the wax into the double boiler. And give that 5 minutes now to melt down. And then I'll be back with you in a moment. Okay, that's nearly melted now. The paraffin wax has very little colour of its own, even when it's dried. Soya wax has a sort of milky colour, but soya wax is very difficult to use for container candle making. It's very difficult to get consistent quality results. So we recommend, at least to begin with, to use paraffin wax. And then once you've got that technique mastered, you can give soya wax a try. Soya wax is much better for pillar blend, for making pillar candles, dinner candles. The blend just seems to work much better, but none of the soya wax blends that we've come across work consistently in container candles. So there we are, that's nearly done. Now we're going to add the dye. Now this dye will actually give us a tea colour, quite a light milky tea colour. It looks quite dark as I add it, and will go darker while it mixes. But it will set plainer than that. So the next thing to do is to get the wick prepared. So take the wick, take the tab, pass the wick through the bottom of the tab, all the way out the top. Take a pair of pliers and close the tab so it's nice and tight, and then use a pair of scissors to trim the bottom. You want it as neat as you can get it. Okay, that's now ready. Let's give the wax one more stir, and then we're ready to do the first pour. Now the purpose of the very first pour is to secure the tab in the bottom of the cup. It's very important that your wick ends up straight and central. And although you can use glue dots in the bottom and they work fine, my favourite technique is simply to put a little bit of wax in the bottom of the cup, drop the tab into it and allow it to set. So I'll turn the heat off of that for now. Just pour, put it around the other way so you can see. Just pour a little in there. Just a little. Now what we're doing is just dropping the wick centrally into the bottom of the tea cup. like that. And now we're just going to allow that to set. It will take perhaps 5 minutes or so. Okay, the wax is now set. You can see from here that it's set into a nice milky tea colour. We now need a pencil or something similar, something wide enough to go over the gap. We're going to use this to anchor our wick. So put a couple of blobs, one each side, opposite each other, and rest the pencil across the middle, like that. Then all we're doing, in fact, let's just move it. You've got to take into account the width of the pencil, so that when the wick is straightened, it goes more or less straight. Well, in fact, almost exactly straight up. It's important that the wick is straight, because otherwise the flame might catch the edge of the container. There we go. That's the completed assembly. That's now ready for the second pouring. So we've left the wax on a low heat. Now I'm going to pour it. And you want to fill it to about 80%. You should have some wax left if you've calculated it properly. There we are, we can leave that now to cool and to harden. What we should find is that it will dip a little in the middle, and the job of the second pour will be to iron out those dips and to give us the finished candle. Okay, the wax has set, so it's time to do the second pouring. So I've warmed my wax up again. Now, very simply, what you're doing is just topping it up to the final level. Like that. Okay, so we'll just give that another half an hour or so to solidify, and then we'll be finished. We'll just be trimming the wick and the job will be done. Right, the wax is now fully set. So I'll remove the wick assembly and trim it with some scissors. This needs to be left for a few hours before being lit. Remember to always trim the wick to around 1 centimetre or so. This keeps the flame at the right size. And that's it, job done.